Right, today we are live on the SEO Leadership webinar. We have Darius back on as well, and we are excited to welcome one of our clients, 427 Marketing, and Ade Holder. He is the founder of 427 Marketing. They have been running for about 8 years, and Ade has been in the industry for about 13 years now. So we're really excited to bring him on and pick at his brain in regards to his experience building an SEO team, how to scale it, what he looks for in his perfect hires, and yeah, anything else that he can advise towards agency owners and hiring managers on what they can look out for as well. So, yeah, without further ado, Aid, how are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah, doing really well, really well. Nice way to spend a Friday morning. So get stuff in.
Definitely, definitely. Aid, so I want to get into, I think the first question to kick it off is if we could go back to when you first started 427 Marketing, what was your thought process behind moving from, just yourself to building out the SEO team itself? And what was your sort of mental approach at that like beginning moment of, wanting to grow that team out?
That's a really good question to kick off with. I think first of all, it's really important. Actually, something I was talking about this with someone the other day, and it was really important to remember that the goal originally was to just replace my salary and survive on my own. That was the whole like just I just wanted to go and do this thing. I wanted to do it my own way. It has a habit of running away with you when these things start to take off. So you sort of have to. I hate using these cliche terms, but you're bootstrapping, right? So you're literally just kind of making decisions as you go, and it's nice to look back on them. So the first decision was I've got to fill the gaps that I don't have because I was good at strategy, good at on-page SEO, loved the content side. I've done a lot of writing, done that kind of side of it, but technical was just kind of out of my remit. The first thing
Mm.
I had to fill the gaps. So I was very lucky to have already worked with Jack, who was our first hire, our technical director, highly skilled SEO, and I've been tapping him up for years for advice in the evenings and just being a real pain, to be honest with him. So it was quite an obvious first step. But you've got to get to the point where you can afford it, first of all, and you've got to make that decision. And we'll probably cover this later, but every hire is scary because there's another commitment. It's another step down the road. So that decision really was, what do we need to be a complete, where's my skill gaps? And that was a really important first step.
And what was, I think if you had to reflect back on the first hire as well, what were some of the, I guess, pros that sort of like helped keep you afloat? How did that first hire help you sort of free up time on your end and sort of complement your work?
Yeah. It was about making what we do better, and that's every. There is a split with hire. There's sometimes it's about being able to do more of the same,
Mm.
but I think it's like to consider every hire as an addition to your service and bring more quality. So it brought a technical level that, as I said, I couldn't
Mm.
supply. I was getting it via, quite honestly, taking advantage of my friends in the industry, saying, "Can you help me with this?" And it was that kind of favor based approach. So it wasn't that we were perhaps lacking so much, but it was like to have it in house. What that then meant was processes could start properly. We could really start moving into audit and migration technical stuff. So it was
Awesome.
it was a big step forward, and it was nice to have it in house rather than having to beg, steal, and borrow these skills.
Yeah.
Well, and Ed, you mentioned obviously the fact that it costs, you have to have the money in the bank basically to afford that first hire. And we also don't have to talk about like actual like figures or anything like that, but was there like a sort of formula or anything like that that you use like when I hit X amount, whether it's like, you know, 2x their salary or whatever?
It's worth to bring up. I'd love to say we would that had that much forethought. That would be so cool to say at that stage we had that level of planning. We, me. It was much more basic than that. It was, what do you need to come here? Okay, let me see if we can keep going until I have that. So it was. I've always been very, to be honest, quite risk averse with the business. I'm not risk averse weirdly in my personal life, but I ride motorbikes, so that's not crazy stuff. But But weirdly, with the business, I always felt there was a protection. I owed it to everybody in the organization, and still do, to make sure that it's safe and that would make it be. So I didn't want to take a gamble, so I had to make sure there was enough to at least cover, or we were generating enough to cover that and then some for at least 2 or 3 months. And I think it still stands with most hires when you're a reasonably small agency. You know you're going to grow as a result of that hire. That's the drive, right? So you have to sort of half have it and half predict that it's coming, and you base it on the growth curve. So that first kind of year and a half or so, it picked up very quickly, and a lot of people that I was friends with, really actual friends at running businesses, saying, "That's great, you're doing it. Jump on." So had quite a quick growth, so we could kind of forecast it was going to be all right. But I wish I had an equation. I'd love to share that, but I don't have one. Like you've got to calculate each one on spec and say, okay, what's last year look like? What does next year going to look like? And have we got enough to cover everyone that's here and the next person? And then there is always just a tiny little bit of running forward to make sure you've gone past that point. But then you need to hire again. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You guys started 427 at such an interesting period because when we chat to other agency owners as well, they all mention like that crucial 2 to 3 year growth period where the agency is like moving from, they kind of like have got their legs on the ground now and they're going to start running and scaling. I think when that had happened with you, like we had just hit COVID, and I know that a lot of people like had used that to their advantage or to their disadvantage. And I know you just mentioned that you didn't have a clear cut sort of cookie cutter pattern on how to handle this, but I just out of curiosity would like to know how you managed sort of uh, risk aversion and scaling during that time just to keep the company afloat. Um,
Wow.
and yeah.
That feels like a long time ago, and in a kind of isn't on the grand scheme of things. And I'm sure anyone else ever watched it, they were running any business at all at that point. It was terrifying. Like it was
Yeah.
straight scary. I spent a good couple of years just working like crazy trying to build something, and I won't lie, totally candid. I came home and I cried. I literally sat with my wife and I was like, "It's all gonna go. Like this is someone's just pulled out all of this stuff that was, and it was tough." But
Mm.
what we did was there was three of us at the time, and we all sat down, had a chat, and I took considerable hit of what my wages. I was just like, okay, what's the absolute bare minimum we can survive on? Of course, our costs were lower. If I'm honest, I wasn't going up very much. I was kind of, maybe my wine budget go up a bit, but otherwise, fairly stable. So we cut it to the core for the first couple of months to see how it was going. We spoke to all the clients. Actually, everyone was digging in to say, no, we're good. Because we weren't a huge overhead, at that stage, it's not a massive spend. I think also with search, there was a lot of people spending a lot of money online. We were all at home. We were fixed. Weirdly, I think that helped through. But so we just took stock for a bit. It was really terrifying. And actually, once we got 2 or 3 months in, we realized that it wasn't as bad as we thought. And I know it was rigged for a lot of businesses, certainly hospitality, and everyone had an awful time. But we just had to just hunker down, try not to spend anything we didn't need to spend, keep everything as tight as possible, and it gradually just opened up. So I still consider us very lucky. We didn't get into any debt or anything like that, and we just sat tight. And I was very lucky to have Jack and Tom, who were both willing to be flexible. And I think everyone wanted to keep this thing that we were building going. So I think everyone pitched in. We got through. But yeah, that was an interesting one.
And then how did you sort of, I think migrating out of that, how did that influence your approach to scaling the agency after that? Did you like sort of go full, like, you know, all guns out? Is
This is like a therapy session. I never thought about this stuff. Okay, my brain saying, "Oh yeah, I did think about that a lot." Yeah, it was coming out. What it did do was it built some of that risk aversion in with me.
Mm,
So again, I'm really always have to be super candid on these things. Prior to COVID, we didn't really have anything in savings. It didn't really cross my mind. It was my first proper business to run. As we came out of COVID, everything was going to savings. Like we were building up because I just basically expected it to happen again. And I thought we were going to either go to some kind of lockdown, or it made me realize that I needed to have at least kind of 3 months salary for everybody sitting in there if someone just turned the tap off completely and it was gone. Because
Mm.
I have a duty of care to everybody that works in and around the 47. It's not about me, it's about us, and everyone's got bills to pay and mortgages, and it's sounds pretty hippy dippy, but yeah, it's a joint venture. So I that was the big outcome. So we did scale, but the scaling that came out of that was more organic, was more actually the desire for a lot of businesses to get going. And
Mm.
because we were still there and we made good connections, we got a lot of lovely leads and word of mouth stuff. From a risk side, it was safety, 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 safety. We just kept being frugal, kept saving.
Like,
Awesome.
and one of we've actually helped like a few people who've gone from like consultants to basically launching their agency with like their first sort of 2 or 3 hires, whether that be like 1 or 2 full time or 2 part time, and sort of help them grow and with their sort of added client load. Um, how for them, is there any sort of like principles or pillars that you would have in place before you bring on your first sort of 2 or 3, even if they're part time? And has there been like maybe like even like your most like expensive mistake when bringing on people that you could sort of guide them?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think on the mistake front, I count myself as incredibly lucky. We have yet to have anyone ever leave, and we've never had an incorrect hire. So I can't comment on that. I'm not claiming we have some magic recipe. We just have lovely people, and it when it works. So far so good, but it'll come. Of course, we'll have our own fit at some point maybe, and we'll have to deal with that. But I think it's really really hard to make those first moves. It really is. It's important, I think, for that first hire to be someone that you bond well with. I would almost suggest that the skill set is important, but at that level, when you're working so closely, if you're going from consultant to two of you or three of you, you've got to get on with those people because they are going to be covering so many different touch points in the business. They are right there all day, every day. So I think those first few hires, you could almost suggest, I'm not just saying go and hire your mates, but they need to be someone that you are willing to hang out with because that's what it's like at that level. So that would be the thing is do focus on skill set, but also try and really interview, have some time, go for lunch, do the whole thing, and make sure that that person knows that they're coming into a small organization. Because I do worry when you say it like that. I remember that is the expectations if someone's come from a larger organization with lots of HR in place and all the cool stuff and the benefits and I know the people stood up pool tables with like the kind of Google office vibe and all that. None of that is there, and it's super rough and ready, but it's also really exciting. So if they're of that mind and you get on with it, then that's always there's bigger parts of the skill set if you're at that stage.
Awesome. I love that. And when it comes to like any sort of like friction, because obviously you've been in the business, it's been you who's managed all the clients and all the execution work. How hard is it to sort of let some of that responsibility go um on to somebody else and sort of let them take your business and sort of run with it?
We should ask the team. I don't know whether I have. I'm not too sure. I'm not that good at that. That it's really hard because it's your baby. The whole thing is so not only is it always a passion project on my part, but it's our project. And as I said earlier, any mistakes made are on me really, and that's people's mortgages, that's people's rent. There's a whole knock on. So the accountability versus responsibility kind of concepts that you can be responsible for your task, but ultimately the accountability that's with the person that set that task and business. So it is really hard. You do let go bit by bit, and I think what we tend to do is we have a very task based project management system. So people will have a task to complete. So you can give them autonomy on that task, and then we look at the overall project and was that met and everything else. So I've now I've let go on the day to day, like actual sort of task level, but yeah, account management stuff's a lot harder. We're not quite at the side yet where I'm going to not be doing a lot of those sort of pitch calls and stuff. That's going to be an interesting journey. Maybe I'll tell you in a couple of years how I let go or not. So I don't know. Whether or not I can, but yeah, that's a tricky one.
Awesome. And you mentioned obviously that you've had nobody leave the business sort of so far yet, which like 100% retention rate is very unique, especially in the agency world as well. Um, what do you sort of put that down to? Is it just the fact that it's good culture? Is there, because obviously like good culture goes to like a certain extent, but some people want progression, they want career opportunities. Like how do you sort of create those like development plans for those people just to keep them sort of engaged as part of the business?
It's a tricky one because I certainly am not claiming, like I said earlier, that I've that this is all on me. That I don't have a magic thing. I think ethos is important. And I can only, it's really weird because I'm speaking on behalf of people that will have an opinion on this. So, sorry, Keem, if you're watching it, I'm getting the wrong end of the stick. But the ethos is really important. Everyone has to feel like they are valued and they have an opinion, and that's the space where they can grow on their own. So that's one side of it. We're not a huge business. We can't do, honestly, massive paychecks. We can't do huge benefits. We can't take everyone to the marketing meetup or whatever in Ibiza, and we just don't have that. That's just not. And we'd be wasting all of our money if we did to a certain extent. So culture, yes. I think what we try and do, and what I've always wanted to do, was let people create their own roles. So within a role, if anyone in our organization has a new idea or a new interest within our SEO space, they could just pitch. Like they literally just say, I really would love to move my role over to this way. Generally, we can kind of accommodate that. We can start working on that and maybe split the role a little bit. So I hope that plays a role in it. And the other side is things like we have unlimited holiday and we have no fixed working hours. So it's a task-based process rather than sit between these hours at your desk. And I think that plays a role in retention. It certainly would with me. When I started the business, when we first started employing other people, I've always wanted to create a business that I wanted to work in. Now, it may be, I always used to find like holiday and things quite claustrophobic. Like the idea that I had 22 days or whatever to have fun a year kind of sweet. It freaked me out. Although one day left, what do I do? I hate. And like generally really like affect me quite a lot. Things like that bugs me. Job titles used to bug me when you wanted one, and people can edit their own job titles. It's fine within the sort of range of normality. So I think some of that helps where people have that agency to be able to build their own role is important. And that like you have to ask them. I don't know. I think we're a friendly, nice bunch. It's a cool place to work. One of the other things I did say I'd ramble on a bit, so bear with me. But one of the other things is it's a really safe space for people to be themselves, and in that I mean you do not have to go to a work party if you don't want to get to a work party. You do not have to do a client thing if you're uncomfortable about doing it. Like it's really important. Anxiety is real. I've had a massive struggle with mine, um, and done my therapy journey and all that sort of stuff, and stuff really matters and it's not comfortable. We all have to do uncomfortable things sometimes, but maybe not too often. And I'd like to give people the choice. So I hope people value that that's the space we're in. It's about the quality of work and it's about everybody caring. That because if they do, then the output works. All the rest of that stuff, oh, you have to come down and get drunk with the team. But well, maybe like that's okay. It's okay if you just not want to socialize. So that's important as well, I think.
I think that's really interesting. I think, yeah, from all our webinars that we've sort of conducted, it's the first time I'm sort of hearing someone say that their culture, the way they, well, what I'm grasping from you is that you kind of like view the culture and how you would want to have, your experience working with the team.
Yeah.
So looking at it through that lens is quite an interesting approach. But yeah, also maybe some trips to Ibiza as well.
There was a time back in the FPA, back in the Penguin Panda days and stuff, where people were really high rolling up in these big agencies. It was the coolest, but these offices were incredible. And like sitting there in our little like 3-man office again. but there's also a knock on with fees and keeping clients and stuff, you know? Like if your overheads are putting your prices up to such an extent that there's a value proposition issue, then that's not how to scale. It might look really cool on paper for a short time, but I don't think there's longevity in that. And we've seen that with some of the bigger agencies, maybe cutting back on perhaps some of the really cool stuff. Cool stuff.
Mm. 100%. I've got a question lined up from one of the viewers that came on. There you go. Um, Roy King asked, in your opinion, when building a team, is it critical to start with SEOs with the most experience or best to start with younger SEOs and get them right? How have you sort of managed to handle
Good
that?
question. Can I say it depends in the classic Google response to that? It really does depend. I think experience is amazing and it's super important, and you get the out of the box. Like, good, I don't need to train because training's quite intimidating, and it really is because it's a big thing, and everyone responds to learning in a very different way, and you don't know whether you could do it right, and so that's maybe me just laying out whether or not I think I can do it right. But I think the problem with super experienced people is that they come at a very big cost. And that's challenging when you're building a team. If you've already got big budget and you've got a lot of money behind you, you can afford to drop 50K a year without really worrying about it, then they're great. And like, go for it. Um, the flip side is if you go super junior, then you're really adding to your workload because you've got to do all the things you were doing as well as educate. So it really is a mix between the two. My advice would be to start with somebody that you can onboard, that get the ethos, that got the vibe, that had the experience, and then backfill underneath with slightly more junior roles if possible, because you've got someone to share that load, and you've already getting breakers in place that you can do it. If I were to go back now and it were me, and then I would take on, I was funny a bit condescending, but a junior, they're like an exec, however we, someone without too much experience. I don't know whether how useful I would have been to them, because it would have just been me doing my thing and really focused. And I imagine they may have spent some time sitting there not knowing. So you need someone that's got some experience to take it forward. And people need to be self starters when you're building a team. You need people to bring stuff to the table, not just wait to be told what the fuck.
Awesome.
I actually it transitions nicely into the question that I had lined up, which was how do you handle the balance between especially I think yeah, considering that the team's been going for 7, 8 years now. How do you handle the balance between strategists and executors in your team?
Interesting. We try and actually try to keep the strategists at the thin end of the wedge. It's lovely to have everyone having a strategy idea, and we do welcome that. But you need a place where that fits. So the
Mm.
strategy tends to fit at one point. What we really like to do though is when everybody's the executors, sounds really dark, isn't it? Correct. When everyone's the doers, and their opinion has to be valid. Like they have to be able to say, I've just found this. I think that goes against what the general plan is. What should we do? Like everybody's opinion has to matter. I hate the idea that someone will go, well, I've just done a task even though I know it's wrong. That would be the worst culture. You're never going to get anywhere. So as a minute, it's trying to keep the strategy at the thin end of the wedge, as it were, and then everybody else doing, but there is a clear comms that can bring more stuff to it. The other addition to that is very much because we've got Brighton FEO coming up. Is very much that when your team are going to talks or they're watching webinars like this, or they're you know where they're sort of getting knowledge from, to be able to bring new tasks to the table. Everybody's ears should be at the ground doing that. So that strategy can be informed by lots of different people, but I think ultimately it has to sit in one spot at the minute.
Awesome. Um, yeah, I think moving on to another question that I had lined up was from your point of view as an agency owner slash running the company. W- you could pull this from the experience of your own team, but what do you think are the most crucial sort of communicative factors that that you appreciate from your team? And do you have any tips to SEO teams that are sort of looking to improve their communication and reporting through to higher level CEOs or founders of agencies?
Hilarious gifts constantly. Seems to be our main method of communication, just on Teams with amusing gifts. I think it, the communication actually comes from the top. You have to open the channels to allow people to be able to communicate. So it's actually not on the team to communicate; it's on the senior leadership team to allow that communication to happen. So if the culture is everybody can say something, then people will start saying something. And
Mm.
I also like people to use the channel they're most comfortable with. So some people aren't overly confident on the phone. Some people aren't overly confident on video calls. They'd rather email. Sometimes the topic is a little awkward, and it's nicer to write it down. So I think my advice would be to make it culturally open so that everybody is allowed to bring up anything they wish and allow them to use the channels that they feel most comfortable. You will get the best out of people if you allow them to communicate and act in the way that they feel best.
Awesome.
And you mentioned that the teams obviously they're all still fully remote. Um,
You pretty do half and half, really. We're kind of move it down here, then yeah, but for remote, yeah.
awesome.
Right.
And you mentioned obviously that it's like a task-based system, so there's no like set sort of working hours. How, what sort of project management tool system do you use to track that? Like, how is it? How have you found people coming from maybe like a more sort of corporate agency side where everything is like 9 to 5? You're getting tracked. Like, how do you
Yeah,
adjust that switch?
good question. So we use Asana at the moment. I say at the moment we sort of came from Basecamp, moved over to Asana. It works better for us, but again, software is software. There'll be lots of cool options. We looked at a few that would work, and it's kind of important not to try and bend software to meet your processes and be able to flex a little bit towards working with the software you've chosen. I think when we bang our head against the brick wall going, why didn't do that all the time? It's better to maybe say, actually, it does this. But let's lean into that a little bit. So that's how we do that. How people who deal with it, again, I feel like I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here. I think everyone gets on well. It's really interesting to watch how people deal with their time management. It's interesting how some of our teams start at 7:30. Teams lights up at kind of 7:30 with morning guys. Someone sends something hilarious, whatever. And then, oh, if you think Google did this last night in the US, and that start. On the flip side, I've got children. We've got people with kids as well, and sometimes, and they won't mind me saying, it took a while for them to get used to it. Some of our more recent hires, they're like, "Oh, is it okay if I take my dog to the vet?" I'm like, "Yeah, you don't really need to. It's cool. Like, just finish the thing you're on and do it." So it's taken a while for getting to the route that they don't have to either feel guilty or check in if they've got to go and do something. It really comes down to at the end is, are we delivering a good product and a good service? And is the other tasks being done in a timely and quality manner? And that's where the project management system comes in because I can see when they're ticked off and we know they're done because they knock on to other things that we're all doing. So it's interesting. I think everyone copes with it quite well. I think everyone loves it. I'm saying that it's like yeah, or they love it. So you probably have to get them on board. But yeah, I think it's been a refreshing change for most people. But I will say again, it's important to what the individual enjoys. Some people want to work 9 to 5. They want to work in that framework, and that totally encouraged as well. So there are assessments. I generally do all the hours. So we do carry on in that vein. Obviously, most of my client calls are within normal hours and all that sort of stuff. So it fits well, and everyone seems to get on. Flexing a
Love
bit.
that. Awesome. Um, to wrap up, I love asking this question at the end. It's sort of a fortune telling question or forecasting question, if I put it like that. It's always quite fun to end it off. But what advice would you give to agency owners today who are looking to build their team or scale their team over the next 5 years?
Interesting. Well, we are in the most crazy period of SEO that I've seen in all of my many years. Yeah, I mean, AI has thrown a huge spanner in the works.
Mm.
So the first thing I would say is embrace and look at it in a positive manner. Like, don't fight it. But it's absolutely pointless. So learn and embrace and go with it and start thinking about how we can run it. any business owner should always look for opportunities, not the need. And that's something I've definitely learned. If something happens that isn't quite what we planned, there's an opportunity in there. Go find it. So that's the first bit. I think I would certainly look at making sure you've got a team that has some people with experience that will remember SEO in its traditional format. A few years back, so they've got some, because a lot of that intent and knowledge and user intent and how all this works will still play a role in all of the learning models going forward. So I think that's really critical.
Yeah.
But I would also be looking for people with a slightly broader skill set, in the sense that search is no longer just going to be Google. We need people that are TikTok natives. We need YouTube. We need LLM. We need, search is now search rather
Yeah.
than Google. I used to just say I do Google stuff. I can't say that anymore. We do stuff across multiple. It's so hard to break out of the just referring to Google all the time as well. And so my advice would definitely add into the mix some people that are native to using other platforms, because we really, really need that. We need all of that experience of search and search intent, and we need people that can create content on other platforms as well.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Love that. Well, yeah, that time flew with this one. It was such an interesting and exciting episode to listen to. So thanks so much, Aid, for joining, and everyone that was listening as well. Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. And yeah, if you guys that are listening have any questions as well, keep popping them in the comments, or pop Aid a follow as well as 427 marketing. And yeah, everyone have a good weekend. And Aid, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. Take care, guys. See you later.